There are places in this world where history refuses to give up its secrets, and Louisiana is one of them. From massive earthworks aligned with celestial events to artifacts that shouldn't exist where they're found, the state holds a legacy of ancient mysteries that defy conventional explanation. Tonight, we're exploring the strange, the unexplained, and the forgotten chapters of Louisiana's past, evidence that challenges what we think we know about early civilizations in North America and might just rewrite history itself. Before we begin, here's a quick note. The visuals in this video add to the experience, but they're not essential to follow along. You can let this play in the background while you work, relax, or even fall asleep to these perplexing mysteries. Deep in the humid bayous of northeastern Louisiana, along the winding curves of the Mississippi River, lies an ancient landscape that shouldn't exist. This is Pottery Point. Forget stone blocks. Here, the mystery is sculpted from the earth itself. Over 3,000 years ago, centuries before Rome was founded, a people with no known writing, no wheels, and no beasts of burden undertook a project of staggering ambition. They moved over 300,000 cubic yards of soil, that's millions upon millions of basket loads, to construct a complex of massive earthen mounds and concentric C-shaped ridges. Just imagine the scale. 6 curving earthworks, some towering over 6 feet high and stretching hundreds of feet long, radiating out from a central plaza. And overlooking it all, Mound a colossal bird-shaped earthwork rising an astonishing 70 feet high, containing enough dirt to fill over 30 Olympic-sized swimming pools. How? That's the question that echoes across these ancient grounds. How did hunter-gatherers, people we traditionally picture living in small, mobile bands focused solely on survival, achieve this monumental feat of landscape engineering? Mainstream archaeology tells us it was done by hand, basket by laborious basket. The theory suggests a highly organized, likely seasonal society, gathering periodically at this sacred site. People would have woven baskets from river cane, filled them with soil dug using simple wooden digging sticks or shells, carried the loads on their backs or heads, and meticulously deposited them to build these precise formations over generations. It speaks to incredible social cohesion and shared purpose. But even accepting this, the sheer volume of earth moved is mind-boggling. We're talking about the equivalent of thousands of dump trucks worth of material, shifted without the wheel or domesticated animals like oxen. It would have required thousands of people working in concert over centuries, a level of sustained cooperation rarely attributed to pre-agricultural societies in North America. Were they motivated by powerful religious beliefs, a sophisticated social hierarchy, or something else entirely? Naturally, the scale invites speculation. Could there have been a simpler, more efficient method lost to time? Some researchers ponder the possibility of basic lever systems or log rollers, though evidence is scant. More fringe theories, fueled by the site's precise geometry and alignments with solstice sunrises, suggest the builders possessed a sophisticated, perhaps even lost, understanding of engineering principles or earth energies. Could sound frequencies or vibrational techniques, knowledge we can scarcely grasp today, have somehow made the earth easier to move or compact? While there's no concrete evidence for such advanced technology, the very existence of Pottery Point forces us to confront the limits of our assumptions about ancient Native American capabilities. Why build this here? Why expend such colossal effort? Was it purely ceremonial, a place for grand gatherings, trade, and rituals connecting communities across the region? Or did it serve a deeper, perhaps astronomical or geophysical purpose, its location and shape tapping into something fundamental about the land itself? Pottery Point stands as a silent, monumental testament to a forgotten chapter of human ingenuity in the Louisiana wetlands, a puzzle built from dirt that continues to defy easy explanation. While Pottery Point astonishes with its scale, another Louisiana site, Watson Break, delivers a shockwave of time. Nestled near the Wachita River, this unassuming complex of 11 earthen mounds connected by ridges holds a title that rewrites the narrative of ancient North America, It is the oldest known mound complex on the entire continent. Forget the familiar timelines of Egypt and its pyramids for a moment. Radiocarbon dating has firmly placed the construction of Watson Brake beginning around 3,400 years before the Common Era. That's over 5,400 years ago. To put that in perspective, Watson Brake's first mounds were already ancient history when the first stones of the Great Pyramid of Giza were laid in Egypt. It predates Stonehenge by centuries. This discovery wasn't just surprising, it was revolutionary. It shattered the long-held belief that large-scale mound building in North America only began with settled agricultural societies much later, around 1,000 or 500 years before the Common Era. Watson Brake forces us to ask, who were these people, living as hunter-gatherers in the forests and swamps of ancient Louisiana, who felt the compelling need to reshape their world with such permanence millennia before farming took root? The builders of Watson Brake lived in a world vastly different from ours. They hunted deer, fished the rich rivers, gathered nuts and wild plants. They moved with the seasons. Yet, they invested immense communal effort into constructing these mounds, the largest rising over 25 feet high, and connecting them with deliberate, circular ridges enclosing a central area. This wasn't haphazard piling of dirt. It was planned landscape architecture on a significant scale, predating pottery or agriculture in the region by thousands of years. What drove them? What powerful idea or necessity compelled mobile hunter-gatherers to stay put long enough, or return consistently enough, to build something meant to last? Mainstream theories lean towards the site being a ceremonial center or a place for periodic social and spiritual gatherings. Perhaps it served as a territorial marker for multiple bands, a neutral ground for trade, marriage alliances, and shared rituals conducted under the watchful presence of the ancestors, possibly represented by the mounds themselves. The circular enclosure might have defined sacred space, separating the rituals within from the everyday world outside. The sheer antiquity raises profound questions. Was this an isolated experiment, or the tip of an iceberg hinting at older, yet undiscovered mound traditions? How did the knowledge and social organization required for such projects emerge among people who didn't cultivate crops or live in permanent villages? Some researchers suggest that the rich resources of the lower Mississippi Valley allowed for greater population density and seasonal sedentism than previously thought for that era, providing the necessary labor pool. Others look to celestial events. Could the mounds align with solstices, equinoxes, or significant stars, serving as an ancient calendar or observatory connecting the people to the cosmos? And then there's the lingering, more dramatic question. Could Watson Brake, and perhaps other undiscovered sites of similar age, represent the faint echo of a much older cultural influence? While highly speculative, the possibility exists that knowledge of mound building, or the symbolic impetus behind it, arrived from elsewhere long before recorded history, carried by peoples whose traces have vanished. Watson Brake's silent mounds stand as enigmatic sentinels guarding secrets from a time when human civilization in North America was taking its first, astonishing steps that were far more complex and monumental than we ever imagined. Its unexpected age forces us to completely reconsider the pace and nature of cultural development in ancient Louisiana. Deep within the lush woodlands of central Louisiana, near the tranquil waters of the old river, lies the Marksville Mounds. On the surface, it appears as another cluster of ancient earthworks, remnants of a time long forgotten. But look closer, peer into the artifacts unearthed from its soil, and a profound mystery unfolds. Marksville doesn't just belong to Louisiana. It whispers of connections stretching hundreds of miles northward, deep into the heartland of the Hopewell culture. This is the Marksville Connection Enigma. How did a site flourishing around 100 to 400 years after the time of Christ, in the bayous of Louisiana, come to share such astonishingly specific cultural traits with peoples thriving contemporaneously in the distant woodlands of Ohio and Illinois? It's a puzzle that challenges our understanding of ancient communication networks across a continent devoid of roads, writing, or beasts of burden. The evidence is undeniable and strikingly material. Step inside a museum showcasing Marksville artifacts, and you might feel transported to a Hopewell site in the Ohio Valley. Here are the elaborate platform pipes, meticulously carved from Ohio pipestone, a material sourced hundreds of miles away. Not just similar, but virtually identical in form and craftsmanship to those found in Hopewell burial mounds. Here are the distinctive pottery styles, intricate designs featuring cross-hatching, precise geometric motifs, and stylized bird figures, motifs echoing powerfully across the Hopewell interaction sphere. Copper ornaments, crafted in shapes and styles mirroring those found in the north, appear. Even burial practices show parallels, suggesting shared cosmological beliefs or ritual traditions. The sheer volume and specificity of these shared traits go far beyond casual trade or simple imitation. It speaks to a deep, sustained connection. But how? How did ideas, artistic styles, ritual objects, and perhaps even people traverse the vast, dense forests, mighty rivers, and diverse territories separating Marksville from the Hopewell core? Mainstream archaeology points towards the existence of vast, sophisticated trade routes, often called interaction spheres. Imagine canoe journeys down the Mississippi and its tributaries, carrying not just goods like pipestone or copper, but also ideas, stories, and religious concepts. Perhaps Marksville was a vital southern node in this network, a place where Hopewellian influences were adopted, adapted, and integrated into a vibrant local culture. Maybe elite individuals traveled great distances, forming alliances or participating in shared ceremonies, carrying these cultural markers with them. Yet, the distance remains staggering. The logistics of maintaining such specific cultural continuity over such a vast, rugged landscape, centuries before any known political unification, boggles the mind. Was there a shared religious movement? A powerful cult that spread its iconography and rituals across half a continent? Or does Marksville represent something even more profound? Evidence of a level of social complexity and long-distance communication in ancient North America that we have consistently underestimated. The Marksville Connection forces us to reimagine the ancient Southeast not as isolated pockets of culture, but as a dynamic landscape woven together by invisible threads of exchange, shared belief, and perhaps a collective identity stretching far beyond what we thought possible. Who were the messengers? What compelled them to bridge such divides? And what other unseen connections might lie buried, waiting to reshape our map of the ancient past? For centuries, the Caddo people, centered in the lush forests and river valleys where Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Oklahoma meet, created objects of breathtaking beauty and profound spiritual significance. Among their most remarkable creations were the effigy pipes. These weren't mere smoking instruments. They were miniature masterpieces carved from sacred red pipestone or resilient clay. Imagine holding a pipe where the bowl is formed by a perfectly rendered human figure, frozen in contemplation or prayer. Or perhaps an animal spirit, a wise owl, a powerful bear, a coiled serpent, rendered with astonishing anatomical detail and imbued with life. These effigy pipes were conduits to the spirit world, central to rituals, diplomacy, and the very identity of the Caddo. Their craftsmanship speaks of generations of refined skill, deep cultural knowledge, and a rich symbolic language. Then suddenly, around the time European explorers began to map the region, this vibrant, centuries-old tradition vanishes. The intricate carvings cease. The Caddo Effigy Pipe Puzzle is this: why, after hundreds of years of continuous, sophisticated creation, did this unique and deeply embedded art form disappear almost overnight from the archaeological record? The sudden cessation is jarring. Imagine a thriving artistic tradition, passed down meticulously from master carver to apprentice for generations, intimately tied to religious practice and social structure, simply stopping. It wasn't a gradual decline in quality or frequency. The evidence points to a relatively abrupt end. What force could be powerful enough to extinguish such a deeply rooted cultural expression? The most obvious suspect is the catastrophic impact of European contact. Waves of devastating diseases like smallpox, measles, and influenza swept through Native American populations decades before sustained European settlement even occurred in Caddo homelands. These plagues could have decimated the communities, killing not just people, but also the master artisans and the elders who held the sacred knowledge and stories associated with the pipes. The social fabric, necessary for apprenticeship and the transmission of such specialized skills, might have unraveled completely. Simultaneously, the violent disruption caused by European encroachment, warfare, forced displacement, and the collapse of traditional trade networks and political structures would have created an environment of profound instability and survival pressure. In such chaos, the resources, time, and peaceful context needed to create these elaborate ritual objects may have simply ceased to exist. But is disease and disruption the whole story? Some researchers probe deeper into the spiritual heart of the matter. Perhaps the arrival of Europeans, with their alien gods, overwhelming technology, and devastating consequences, caused a profound spiritual crisis. Did the old rituals, symbolized by the effigy pipes, seem suddenly powerless against the onslaught? Might there have been a deliberate rejection of these traditions, a turning towards new forms of spiritual practice or protective magic in the face of an incomprehensible catastrophe? Could the pipes themselves, potent vessels of prayer and connection, have become taboo, associated with a time of suffering and loss? Alternatively, the disruption of trade routes might have made the specific, high-quality pipestone harder to obtain, forcing a change in materials and perhaps style that ultimately led to the tradition's demise. Or was the loss so total, the artisans gone, the context shattered, that even when some stability returned generations later, the intricate knowledge of how to create these specific effigy forms and the full depth of their meaning was irretrievably lost? The silence left by the vanished effigy pipes echoes loudly. It's a stark reminder of the fragility of cultural traditions in the face of overwhelming change. Were they the last, beautiful offerings of a world on the brink? And what profound spiritual void did their disappearance leave behind in the Caddo world? Beneath the often murky, cypress-dotted waters of Lake Salvador, just west of New Orleans, lies a mystery that blurs the line between natural wonder and human ingenuity. Sonar imaging and the observations of divers have revealed peculiar formations scattered across the lakebed. We're talking about long, linear arrangements of rocks, some appearing as potential walls or foundations. There are clusters of stones that seem deliberately placed, not randomly scattered. And intriguingly, what look like circular patterns emerge from the depths. To the untrained eye, and even to some seasoned observers, these formations scream ancient ruins. Could Lake Salvador hold the remnants of a lost settlement, submerged by rising waters or a cataclysmic event centuries or even millennia ago? Or is nature, with its own slow, powerful processes, playing an elaborate trick on us? The debate over Lake Salvador's underwater ruins is a fascinating tug-of-war between tantalizing possibility and geological reality. Proponents of the human origin theory point to several compelling factors. Louisiana's coastline is notoriously dynamic, sinking and shifting over time due to subsidence and sediment compaction. Sea levels have risen significantly since the end of the last ice age. It's entirely plausible, even likely, that ancient sites built near the shores of ancestral bayous or lakes are now underwater. The linear arrangements and apparent circles resemble known indigenous construction techniques used elsewhere for fish weirs, ceremonial enclosures, or dwelling foundations. Could these be the remnants of a seasonal fishing camp, a ceremonial ground, or even a small village established when the water levels were lower? The location, near rich aquatic resources, makes it a logical spot for ancient habitation. Some divers report stones that feel worked or positioned in ways that seem unnatural for random deposition, The sheer presence of significant rock formations in an area primarily characterized by mud and silt also raises eyebrows. Where did these stones come from, and how did they get there in such configurations? Geologists, however, offer powerful counterarguments rooted in the region's turbulent natural history. South Louisiana is a landscape built by the Mississippi River, a force that constantly deposits sediment, shifts its course, and reshapes the land. The stones found in Lake Salvador, they argue, are likely rip-up clasts. Imagine a powerful hurricane surge or a catastrophic flood event barreling through the area. Such an event can scour the riverbed or older sediment layers, ripping up chunks of consolidated mud, peat, or even weakly cemented sandstone. These ripped-up blocks are then transported by the raging water and deposited chaotically as the floodwaters recede. Over time, these scattered blocks can settle into patterns that appear linear or clustered simply due to the physics of deposition or subsequent minor shifting. Wave action, currents, and even boat propellers over decades can further nudge stones into positions that mimic human construction. The apparent circles could be coincidental arrangements or the result of objects settling around submerged tree stumps long since rotted away. The lack of definitive artifacts of pottery shards, tools, charcoal from ancient hearths, associated directly within these formations is a significant hurdle for the human origin theory. While intriguing, are we seeing the hand of ancient builders or the powerful, chaotic fingerprint of nature unleashed by storms and floods? Could it be a combination, ancient peoples utilizing naturally deposited stones for simple structures, now further rearranged by time and water? Lake Salvador keeps its secrets close. Its ruins, a persistent enigma suspended between the realms of human history and the immense, shaping power of the Louisiana wetlands. What truly lies beneath the surface? We may need more than sonar images to solve this watery puzzle. Rising dramatically from the flat coastal marshes of southern Louisiana, Cote Blanche Island is a stark, tree-covered anomaly. Its prominence isn't due to ancient mounds, but to something far more fundamental buried deep below, a vast subterranean column of salt, a salt dome. While salt domes are a defining geological feature of the Gulf Coast, crucial to the modern oil industry, the story of Cote Blanche holds an ancient mystery. Archaeological evidence reveals that Native Americans, centuries before European contact, perhaps as early as 1,500 years ago or more, weren't just aware of this salt source. They were actively and ingeniously mining it. The Cote Blanche Island salt dome's mystery asks, how did hunter-gatherer and early horticultural societies, without metal tools or deep mining technology, master the complex process of extracting valuable salt from deep within the earth, millennia before modern industry? Salt wasn't a luxury in the ancient world. It was a biological necessity and a crucial preservative. Finding reliable sources was vital. Evidence at Cote Blanche and other nearby salt dome islands, like Avery Island, points to sophisticated indigenous salt works. Imagine the scene. Not deep mine shafts, but carefully managed boiling operations near salt springs or brine seeps forced to the surface by the upward pressure of the massive salt plug below. Archaeologists have found vast quantities of fired clay fragments, the remnants of thick, durable ceramic vessels known as salt pans. These weren't ordinary pots. They were industrial-scale containers designed to withstand intense, sustained heat. The process likely involved collecting brine, salt-saturated water from springs or shallow wells dug to access the salty groundwater around the dome. This precious brine was then poured into the massive salt pans. Fires, fueled by readily available wood from the island's forests, burned fiercely beneath the pans for hours, even days, boiling off the water. Left behind were cakes of precious crystalline salt. The scale is impressive, requiring significant labor to gather fuel, tend fires, manage brine collection, and produce the specialized pottery. The ingenuity extends beyond just boiling. How did they locate the most productive brine seeps? Did they dig channels or shallow wells to concentrate the flow? How did they manage the intense heat without shattering their pottery? Was there a specific clay mixture or firing technique perfected over generations? The organization required is equally fascinating. Salt production on this scale implies specialization. It likely wasn't an occasional activity, but a seasonal industry, perhaps involving groups traveling specifically to the island for this purpose. Producing salt in such quantities suggests it wasn't just for local use. Cote Blanche salt became a valuable trade commodity, likely transported via canoe networks throughout the lower Mississippi Valley and beyond, exchanged for other necessities or prestige goods. This implies a complex understanding of economics and long-distance exchange networks centuries before European markets arrived. The mastery displayed at Cote Blanche shatters simplistic notions of pre-colonial technology. These weren't primitive people. They were resourceful engineers and chemists who identified a critical resource, developed specialized tools and industrial processes to exploit it, and integrated its production into a wider economic system. What other sophisticated technologies, now lost to time or hidden beneath the marshes, did these ancient Louisianans possess? The salt domes stand as silent monuments not just to geology, but to a forgotten chapter of indigenous innovation and industry. Scattered across ancient Caddo sites in northwest Louisiana, primarily dating between 1,000 and 500 years ago, archaeologists have unearthed fragments of pottery that stop you in your tracks. Molded onto the rims or bodies of otherwise typical Caddo bottles or bowls are human faces. But these aren't the stylized, traditional Caddo representations. These faces appear strikingly classical. Some bear features reminiscent of Roman or Greek sculptural traditions, defined noses, bearded chins, hairstyles that seem oddly familiar to anyone who's seen statues from the Mediterranean. This is the heart of the Roman head pottery controversy. Why do these distinctly non-local, seemingly European-looking faces appear in the artwork of Native American potters centuries before sustained European contact? Are they evidence of improbable transatlantic voyages? Or is something far more intriguing happening within the artistic imagination of the Caddo world? The visual similarity is undeniable and immediately sparked sensational theories. Could Roman ships, blown off course, have reached the Gulf Coast? Might there have been fleeting, unrecorded contact with Mediterranean explorers or even survivors of a shipwreck centuries before Columbus, influencing Caddo artists? The idea captured popular imagination, fueled by the desire for dramatic, revisionist history. However, mainstream archaeology firmly rejects this diffusionist explanation. The pottery itself is chemically and stylistically consistent with local Caddo manufacture. The clay is local, the vessel forms are classic Caddo types, and the methods like mold-made faces applied to pots are indigenous techniques. There's no corroborating evidence, no Roman coins, no metal artifacts, no shipwrecks, no linguistic traces, no recorded legends to support actual contact. The dating also poses a significant problem. While the pottery dates to the centuries before Columbus, suggesting influence would require contact even earlier, for which there's absolutely no evidence. So if not Romans, what inspired these enigmatic faces? This is where the controversy deepens into a fascinating exploration of indigenous art and human perception. One compelling theory is that the Roman appearance is largely coincidental, a result of our own cultural lens projecting familiar European features onto stylized Native American art. Caddo artists were masters of ceramic portraiture, creating realistic and stylized human faces long before any potential European influence. The features we interpret as Roman, a strong nose, a beard, a particular hair treatment, could simply be elements of Caddo artistic convention or representations of specific individuals, spirits, or ancestors within their own cultural context. Perhaps they depict revered elders, mythological figures, or even representations of enemies or captives, rendered with a degree of naturalism that happens to overlap with classical styles. Another possibility is stylistic convergence. Artistic traditions in different parts of the world can independently develop similar solutions to representing the human face. The need to depict a nose, eyes, and mouth in relief on a curved surface might lead to similar formal solutions, like a prominent nose bridge, without any shared cultural input. Could there be an indirect influence, filtered through vast trade networks? While direct Roman contact is implausible, could artistic motifs or concepts have traveled incredibly slowly across continents through indigenous trade routes over centuries, becoming radically transformed yet retaining some faint echo? It's highly speculative. The most likely explanation remains that these are powerful examples of sophisticated naturalistic Caddo portraiture, reflecting their own world and beliefs that we misinterpret due to our own cultural baggage. Yet, the controversy persists. Why did this specific style of more naturalistic, less stylized human representation emerge at this particular time among the Caddo? What specific cultural significance did these faces hold? Were they portraits of specific chiefs or priests? Depictions of deities. The Roman heads remain a potent reminder of the power and complexity of Native American art, challenging us to see beyond our own assumptions and appreciate the indigenous genius that created them, entirely on its own terms, deep in the forests of ancient Louisiana. Imagine a place once alive with ceremony, a bustling center where generations lived, traded, and connected with the spirit world. Towering earthen platforms, some perhaps reaching 60 feet high or more, dominated the skyline near present-day Jonesville, Louisiana. This was Troyville, a major mound complex believed to have been built and occupied primarily between about 400 and 700 years after the time of Christ. Historical accounts and early surveys describe it as the second largest mound group in Louisiana, surpassed only by Poverty Point in its scale and significance. It was a vital hub, likely a political and religious center for the local Coles Creek culture. Then, within a few short decades in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, it was almost completely obliterated. The Troyville Mounds Disappearance is a tragic tale not of natural disaster, but of human disregard and the relentless march of progress that erased a monumental piece of Louisiana's ancient heritage. The story of Troyville's destruction is one of heartbreakingly short-sighted utility. The primary culprit, the insatiable demand for earth. As Jonesville and surrounding areas developed, the mounds presented a convenient, massive source of free-filled dirt. Their soil was perfect for building roads, leveling lots for construction, and constructing railroad embankments. Imagine steam shovels and teams of laborers systematically carting away centuries of sacred earth, basket load by basket load, to be dumped as mere foundation material. Historical records are sparse, but anecdotes and later archaeological surveys paint a grim picture. Mound after mound was reduced, flattened, or completely removed. What had taken generations of coordinated human effort to build was dismantled in a fraction of that time. The lure of easily accessible dirt outweighed any perceived value in preserving these ancient monuments. There was little understanding of, or regard for, the deep cultural significance these structures held. They were simply Indian mounds, relics of a past deemed unimportant in the face of modern expansion. The loss is incalculable. We will never know the full layout of the complex, the exact heights and shapes of its largest mounds, or the intricate details of the structures that once crowned them. Countless artifacts, burials, and layers of history were destroyed or scattered without record. The unique story Troyville could tell about the Coles Creek culture, their social organization, their ceremonies, their connections to other groups, was largely erased before archaeologists could properly study it. Only fragments remain, a few small, disturbed mounds, some artifacts salvaged by early antiquarians or found in later, limited excavations, and the frustratingly brief descriptions from early surveys. These remnants hint at Troyville's former grandeur, but offer only a shadow of what was lost. The disappearance of Troyville stands as a stark, sobering lesson. It highlights a time when America's ancient past was treated as disposable, a resource to be consumed rather than a heritage to be protected. What secrets about Louisiana's ancient societies did those mounds take with them? What specific ceremonies echoed across their summits? What leaders were laid to rest within their earth? The answers are gone, buried not by time, but by the blades of steam shovels and the relentless need for filled dirt. Troyville's near-total erasure is a haunting reminder of the fragility of the past and the enduring cost of neglect. Walk across the ancient landscape of Pottery Point in northeastern Louisiana, and you'll inevitably find them littering the ground, especially after a rain. Millions upon millions of small, fired clay objects. They come in a bewildering array of shapes, perfect little balls, by cones, like two cones stuck together at the base, cylinders, animal forms, discs, and even peculiar cross-cylinder shapes. They're typically about the size of a golf ball or smaller, made from local clay and hardened in fire. Archaeologists collectively call them Pottery Point objects, or PPOs. They are the most abundant artifact found at the site, numbering in the tens of millions. This sheer volume is staggering, but the central mystery remains. What on earth were they for? The Pottery Point object's function is a seemingly simple question that has perplexed researchers for decades, turning these humble clay pieces into one of Pottery Point's most enduring enigmas. The most widely accepted theory, championed for years, is the cooking ball hypothesis. Imagine an earth oven, a pit dug into the ground and filled with hot rocks. The idea is that these clay objects were heated in a large fire until they were red hot. They were then raked into the pit, covered with food like fish, waterfowl, tubers, or even large game, and the whole thing was sealed with earth. The PPOs, holding heat far longer and more evenly than regular stones, would slowly cook the food over many hours. This makes practical sense. The local soil lacks suitable cooking stones, so manufacturing artificial rocks from abundant clay solves the problem. Experiments show it works. The variety of shapes. Perhaps different shapes heated or retained heat differently, suited for different cooking tasks. Or maybe they were simply the result of individual makers' styles or experimentation over time. The millions found could represent the sheer scale of feasting required to feed the large, periodic gatherings believed to have occurred at Pottery Point. However, significant questions challenge this seemingly neat explanation. Why such an extreme number? Even accounting for massive feasts and breakage, the sheer quantity found seems excessive if they were only cooking tools. Many PPOs show no signs of exposure to intense, repeated heat. They aren't discolored or cracked in the way you'd expect from being used as oven liners multiple times. Some are incredibly intricate, like tiny, detailed animal effigies, shapes seemingly impractical for heating and unlikely to survive repeated use. Were these special objects for ritual, not cooking? This leads to alternative theories. Could they have been used in manufacturing? Some suggest they were pottery smoothers, tools used to shape and smooth larger clay vessels while still wet. Others propose they were loom weights for weaving, though evidence for large-scale weaving at Pottery Point is limited. Perhaps they served a ritual or symbolic purpose. Were they votive offerings, deliberately broken and scattered, counters used in complex games or record-keeping, tokens representing individuals or groups, teaching tools for children, or maybe a combination, primarily cooking tools, but with specific shapes or decorated versions taking on additional meanings? The variety itself is a clue. Such diversity suggests multiple uses or deep symbolic significance beyond mere utility. Why produce animal effigies just to heat them until they crack? The Pottery Point objects, in their overwhelming numbers and perplexing diversity, defy a single, simple answer. Were they the practical engine of ancient feasts, or did they hold meanings and purposes we can only dimly perceive, scattered like tiny, silent riddles across the vast earthworks? The Atchafalaya Basin, Imagine a vast, watery wilderness in south-central Louisiana, America's largest river swamp, a sprawling labyrinth of slow-moving bayous, towering cypress trees draped in moss, flooded forests, and teeming with life. Fish, waterfowl, reptiles, mammals, and edible plants thrive in this incredibly rich ecosystem. To any student of ancient cultures, this abundance screams prime real estate. Environments like this, offering diverse, concentrated resources, typically attracted significant human populations. Think of the incredible mound sites built along major rivers like the Mississippi. Yet, when archaeologists look for evidence of substantial permanent ancient settlements within the heart of the Atchafalaya Basin itself, they find a puzzling void. Compared to the density of sites found on the natural levees of adjacent rivers like the Mississippi or Red, the core swamp appears strangely empty. This is the Atchafalaya Basin's missing settlements mystery. Why does one of the most resource-rich environments in North America show so little evidence of long-term, large-scale ancient habitation? The apparent scarcity is counterintuitive. The basin offers an incredible year-round bounty. Fish are abundant, migratory waterfowl fill the skis seasonally, deer and smaller mammals inhabit the higher ridges, natural levees. Edible plants like lotus and various tubers grow readily, and shellfish can be gathered. Such environments often supported complex hunter-gatherer societies or early horticultural groups elsewhere. So where are the major mound centers, the dense village middens, trash piles, the pottery scatters that signal sustained occupation? Several factors, both practical and archaeological, might explain the silence. Firstly, the dynamic and challenging nature of the swamp itself. The basin is prone to dramatic seasonal flooding. Water levels can fluctuate massively. Truly dry, stable land suitable for permanent villages is limited and often confined to narrow natural levees along the main channels. Building substantial earthen mounds in perpetually wet, unstable soil is incredibly difficult, perhaps impossible with ancient technology. Much of the basin is simply too wet for year-round occupation without advanced water management, like raised platforms or extensive canals, which isn't evidenced. Secondly, the environment itself might be hiding the evidence. The acidic, waterlogged soils of swamps are notorious for poor preservation. Organic materials, wood, bone, basketry, even human remains decay rapidly. Pottery might survive, but it could be deeply buried under layers of sediment deposited by frequent floods or obscured by dense vegetation and root systems. Sites built on low ridges could have been completely eroded or buried over the centuries. What looks like an absence might be an issue of visibility and preservation bias. Thirdly, perhaps the ancient peoples used the basin intensely, but strategically. Rather than building large permanent villages in the deepest swamp, they might have established seasonal camps, moving strategically to exploit different resources throughout the year. They could have lived primarily on the edges of the basin, on the higher, drier terraces bordering the swamp, venturing deep inside for specific resources like fish spawning runs, waterfowl hunting, or gathering particular plants. This logistical use would leave fewer traces of substantial, permanent structures within the basin core itself. Their main villages and mounds would be located on the periphery, where evidence is found. Could there also be a cultural factor? Did the peoples inhabiting the region view the deep swamp not as a place for villages, but as a sacred or dangerous realm, a domain of powerful spirits or dangerous creatures, better exploited temporarily than settled permanently? Was the sheer difficulty of navigating and living within the constantly shifting waterways and flooded forests a deterrent to large-scale settlement, despite the abundance? The mystery isn't that people weren't there. Evidence of hunting, fishing, and gathering exists, but why they didn't establish the kind of large, permanent, mound-building communities seen in similarly resource-rich, but drier, locations nearby. Does the Atchafalaya's silence reflect a conscious choice by ancient peoples, the destructive power of the swamp environment on archaeological remains, or a combination of both? Unraveling this requires looking not just for grand mounds, but for subtle traces, stone tools in buried levees, fish bone in deeply stratified middens, pollen indicating ancient plant use. Hopping the swamp hasn't completely erased the story of how ancient Louisianans truly interacted with one of the world's great wetlands. What secrets does the murky water still hold? The past is filled with mysteries, some buried deep beneath the Louisiana soil, others hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to notice. The stories we've uncovered tonight are just a glimpse into the strange, the unexplained, and the forgotten pieces of history that still puzzle archaeologists and spark endless debate. But the more we search, the more questions we uncover.